In this series of weekly conversations, we have been bringing to you speakers from the development sector and how engaging in volunteering can just be the first step to something much bigger. Today, we are joined by Jithin Nedumala, the co-founder of CEO and CEO of Make a Difference or MAD. MAD mobilizes and builds volunteer communities around children in need of care and protection and ensures 90% of the children they work with are able to realize middle class adult outcomes. Jithin is passionate about creating a better world for children and is working towards building a methodology of care that would enable even the most vulnerable children to heal from their trauma and realize their full potential. He believes in the power of self organized, decentralized communities because the resources required to solve this problem at its full scale already exist at the community level and is only waiting to be realized. Matt does this by providing holistic interventions ranging from emotional health, life skills, education, transition readiness, and aftercare from the age of 10 till the age of 28. Matt currently mobilizes over 60 communities across 23 cities in India, reaching out to over 3,500 children. Welcome, Jithin. We're truly excited to be reconnected with you.
Yes. Hi.
Yeah. So, to help us understand MAD better, could you please share some core principles on which the organization has been built?
Sure. For us as an organization, we started as volunteering organization where a bunch of young people who were kind of spending time in a shelter home and understanding what the realities were. So a big part of our organization is built around on-ground understanding of what the challenge is and really understanding it directly instead of depending on theoretical knowledge beyond a point. So we feel that first the experience and immersion comes first, and it's based on. So we really do value the knowledge of the practitioner a lot. We genuinely believe that at the end of the day, the people who are on ground who are doing the work actually has a lot of wisdom, and that needs to be considered. So that is one core principle that we are built on. Another core principle is our understanding of impact. What do we mean by impact? Which is when we feel that doing good by itself does not mean that you're making a difference. You're making a difference if the people that you're working with, their lives have fundamentally become better. And again, even when you say better, it all becomes a little complicated to understand. For example, somebody who's drowning 10 feet underwater, uh, if you go down and help him, by reducing his drowning distance by 50%, now he's drowning 5 feet underwater. Would we call that impact? In some, that's a question to ask, right? Because the truth is it's not, because in 2 minutes, whether he's drowning 10 feet underwater or 5 feet underwater, he's still dead. So for us, impact is a benchmark, which is that we believe that only if the person who we are working with is able to cross the benchmark, that threshold, will we consider it impact. So anything below that does not count as impact to us. And hence, when you look at it many times, when you're working with children, the focus is, okay, did they score good marks? Did the score go up by 50% or 100%? And that's what people report on. But the truth is, if the students that you're working with is scoring 5 or 6 out of 100 in maths, and now they're scoring 12 in maths, it doesn't really change much for the child. The child has still failed. The child will still not really continue education after 10 standard, or the way he continues after education after 10 standard will not really, like the value that we say education will have in their life is not really actually achieved. So then what is it that you consider as impact when you're working with children? And for us as an organization, we believe that unless you're able to confidently say that the children that you're working with will be able to, as when they get back into society, they are no longer at risk, and their children will not end up in a shelter home again. Is that something that you can be confident about? Then we can say that, fine, then we have created impact. So that's probably another core core belief that we have. And the third is around whose job is it to actually create this impact? Is it the job of the government, or is it the job of the people who live around, in the environment itself? And we do feel that it is it is a lazy assumption to make that as a citizen, all I need to do is pay some amount of my money as taxes every year, and with that, government will be able to take care of all the problems. Like, we have not seen that anywhere. Even if there is this highly functional government, there is still a big role that citizens actually have to ensure that their local community is actually functioning well. Otherwise, the government just gets too bloated. So we also believe that you know most of the problems should be solved at the level that it can be solved. So not escalating problems outside the realm, and trying to solve it where it is another actor, and that's where we talk a lot about community building and things like that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Jithin. Just going back to a couple of points that you just shared. One is MAD as an organization started off by teaching English to children. But what you're doing right now is very different. So, how did this transition, and again, connecting it back to your impact? I'm sure there's some amount of learning that happened from delivering certain things or being in touch with children in need. So, how did that transition happen for you as an organization?
Yeah. It happened primarily because I kind of, we when we went into a shelter home, and we spoke to children, and basically with the limited understanding we really really uh, thought that English would fundamentally make a big impact in their life. We saw
Mm,
these stats about how if you know English really well, your chance of employment goes up by 400%. And
mm,
there's a whole spectrum of, if you are good in English, your life is much better. And so we taught English, and we try to teach it the best way we can. And but what we realize is that the children who were, the expectation we had is that after 10th standard or after 12th standard, children will, because of that, get better job opportunities or get better experiences in life. But what we noticed is that they're still failing after 10th standard and not continuing their education after 10th standard, or
mm,
failing after 12th standard, or not continuing education after 12th standard. So English, just knowing English alone was not playing a uh, big enough role. It had to be a lot more than that. So there was one realization from that. So I still work with the same children that I started working with now around 14, 15 years back, right? And that and a lot of the program development that Make a Difference is done is based on that, which is that as the children grow older, we are able to understand there are different needs that they have at different stages. So yes, probably when we started, we were working with children who are 12, 13 years old. And at that time, we thought education was important, and probably education does play a role. But once the children get out of the shelter home at the age of 18, we realize that they're facing a lot more other challenges also, especially these are first generation learners. Even if they study well and they got into a good college, they don't have the college fees they don't have the money to pay the college fees. They don't have the money to stay in the PG. And even if they got into the college and they figured out the money to stay, to pay for the college and stay in the PG, because they are first generation learners whose parents has never been to a college or even a school.
mm,
Them coping up with that kind of academic rigor is actually quite complicated, and
mm,
they constantly start getting a lot of other stresses from their environment which normal children do not get. So then we started expanding our programs to incorporate to ensure that those things are also supported for.
mm,
And then once they got out of college, we kind of realized that there are actually still more problems. It's not just enough to get out of college, but then even when you're sitting in a placements, if a lot of us have actually been in an environment where our parents woke up in the morning and got dressed and went to work every day, and so we have seen some kind of a work ethic.
mm,
But for a lot of children that we work with, they have what they have seen is they have not seen that kind of work ethic amongst their parents. Many of them have had seen a negative work ethic amongst their parents.
mm,
Their fathers who are sleeping all day, getting around in the evening, getting drunk, coming back. You know, so that's so. And a lot of the cyclical nature is still repeat. So children are actually not aware of what are the kind of etiquettes to manage and how to get into these jobs, how to where to find these jobs, and how to progress in these jobs. These are all not information that they actually have, or like what our parents would have probably told us. So
mm,
then we realized, okay, fine, we need to start supporting from that angle also. And
mm,
then it moved into other, so that we basically, now they are 28 years old, and we finally feel, so the impact that Make a Difference looks at is that at the age of 28 they should be able to earn a salary of 40,000 rupees or more,
mm,
and should be able to have at least a 2 BHK house
mm,
in a non-slum area. And they're able to send their children to
mm,
not, to a good school. So this is what
mm,
we're looking at. And they should have a community support system of their own, and
mm,
have very minimal behavioral issues, because children coming from these backgrounds do tend to have a higher level of behavioral issues.
Mm,
So that also was another focus that we had. And by 28 now we feel confident that okay fine, we'll be able to get to that. So our program kind of is kind of petering off at 28.
mm,
So I think just staying with the children that you're working with, and first having a clear idea of what impact is not getting 100 out of 100 in your 10th standard, because it doesn't end there.
yeah,
There are still a lot of hurdles, and having a clear understanding of what your impact is, and then following through with your youth to see if you have actually made that impact, and making whatever changes required in the program to
yeah,
ensure that that impact is met, is
wonderful.
really the focus of, that's basically how we went about designing the program.
Right. That's wonderful. I mean, you can really see how MAD has grown and it's actually shifted based on the needs of the children as well. That's wonderful. And MAD is one of our experts in mobilizing volunteers, if I could say. And what are some skills or attributes you look for in young people looking to contribute in the social sector?
Okay. Well, the number one thing, so we basically have three values in MAD. I don't know if you remember, but we kind of still stick to those, and our hiring is primarily focused on the three values that we believe in. The first one is called cause above self, which is basically we look for people who believe in something larger than themselves. People who believe that uh, they would like to work towards something that is towards a larger cause, which kind of enables people to think beyond their own specific needs, but is able to and what we really realize about that is that it is actually quite a natural thing for human beings to do. We have been kind of growing up in these communities or in groups where the most selfishness is not really such a some
Mm,
we do think for the group and all those kind of stuff.
mm,
So that's one characteristic we look for, people who are kind of who are ready to put the cause above themselves when it comes to working with the kind of work that we are doing. The second one is leadership through ownership, which is people who when they see a challenge, who are people who are driven to solve problems, even if they have not the ones who caused the problem themselves.
mm,
So the way we kind of look at it is that uh, when we want to identify people who are proactive, who are driven, who can understand, you know, you- understand that the problem existing affects any problem that exists affects all of us. So it
mm,
doesn't matter who solves it. If I can solve it, let me step in and do that.
mm,
And so a level of entrepreneurial, trait is something that we notice, that we look for at that point of time. And the third one is a sense of family. So it's basically people who are able to build relationships in a non-transactional manner, like a family. In a family, you are supporting each other not because because if I support you today, tomorrow you will support me back. It is primarily because you care about this person and you want the best for this person, and you want to do that. And we want that's the kind of relationships that we feel will work in a volunteering community, where people are helping each other not because you scratch my back, I scratch your back, kind of a work relationship, but
yeah.
more because they genuinely believe that what, like we are here trying to solve something that is much bigger than ourselves. I won't be able to do this by myself. So
Mm,
if only I support everybody around me, together we might be able to have a shot at it on one side. And on the other side, it also enables me to really push myself and take risks and try new things.
mm,
And because I know that even if I make a mistake, there'll be people to back me up and support me and help
mm,
me through this, right? So enables people to kind of step into their bigger side. So the sense
mm,
of family is another core. So as long as people are can kind of are able to showcase these values,
mm.
we would be happy to have them in the organization.
Wonderful, wonderful. So just, I mean, so you spoke about some of these attributes. One is they're going to come in with this, probably they're inclined to demonstrate these. So
Hmm.
how do you help your volunteers contribute effectively? That is getting them to unlearn and learn so that they're able to achieve your intended outcomes while also building and practicing these values actively while they are in your organization.
True. Well, yeah, there is definitely a lot of unlearning that is required, primarily because, uh, the primary thing that we provide is care to child, and care in the lines of parental care, and and the unfortunate reality is that not all of us have also experienced parental care in its ideal way, right? Like sometimes we have also, like there are a lot of our volunteers who have experienced a lot of lack of attunement in their own families, where
Family.
their own families have kind of ignored them, or they have gone through their own challenges with that. There are volunteers who have experienced their own types of abuses in their own ways. And frankly, many times parents do care in a transactional way too. If you score well in this exam, you will get a cycle, otherwise you won't, right? So or getting disappointed in the children if then they don't do what exactly you're doing, or getting angry at them. So there's a lot of these components that does exist. So when somebody is coming into the system, so it's very important for us to enable them to kind of unlearn a bunch of those behaviors, and understand care from scratch. Or no, I think it's more to do with like understand what is the kind of care that the children need, right? And the way we go about doing it is that we have set a particular norm of care inside the organization.
Okay.
So there is a way that we care for the volunteers in the
Mm.
organization, and volunteers model that care to the child.
Mm.
And that's how we can transition it, because they need to experience a big part of, and things like care. A lot of these soft skills are best when you experience it yourself, and when you're immersed. Human beings are really good at adapting to the environment,
Mm.
right? So if something is a norm in one place, you will kind of naturally re-exhibit the same norms.
True.
And that's something that we have noticed. So as an organization, we do keep, one of our central this thing is that we do, when we act with each, even at an employee level or any level.
Mm.
One of the kind of questions we ask ourselves is that if the other person was a youth, and the way we are caring for the other person, is it relevant, even if it's a youth in Make a Difference, or a child in Make a Difference, right?
Mm.
Like, and is that the way we should go about doing it?
Mm.
So that's definitely one way we kind of reset and enable people to kind of experience what it is to feel
Mm.
cared for, so that they can also care.
Mm.
That helps in some ways. There are also like what we are also recognizing increasingly is that there is need for regular trainings instead of one or two major trainings in the beginning.
Mm. Mm.
So now we are like, so a volunteer who's come into a class spends an hour before the class preparing for the class with everybody. But this year on, we're actually now planning to have a small training program enabling them to do, how to go about improving their skill set on a weekly basis,
Mm.
so that they get an opportunity. So they're doing it, it's almost like an apprenticeship model,
Mm.
where you get the theory in the beginning of the class, you get to practice that theory in the
Mm.
class, and after the class there's a debrief where you're able to kind of see if you have picked it up.
Right.
And and then repeat every
Right.
kind of thing. So that also really helps.
Mm.
And the final component, probably what I would say here, is really understanding the problem at its depth.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, we are going in with a solution. We are saying, okay, we are here to help you. We are here to kind of, to provide a solution. But the quality of your solutions is fundamentally dependent on the quality, how well you understand the problem. And
Mm.
many times we do not understand the problem because we have not lived in a shelter home. We are
Mm.
not from a government school. We
Right.
are not from the kind of families that the children are coming from,
Right.
right? So it's very easy to make a lot of, like, take our, so like our assumption, and assume that this is basically what is going on. Well,
Right.
that's not what is happening at all. So
Mm.
spending a lot of time understanding where is the like, just really understanding the context of the child,
Mm.
and understand the problems that the child is working on. For example, a lot of the work that we do is about understanding this whole idea of adverse childhood experiences,
Mm.
which is that, if you experience a bunch of a particular set of a negative experience as a child, it has fundamental impact on you in the long term.
Wow.
And the way you interact in class and all this stuff is very different. Now,
Mm.
unless you understand what ACE is and what kind of impact it has on you, and how you can actually provide, like how you, when you're trying, you might actually be thinking that you're trying to help somebody, but actually is making it more difficult for them,
Mm.
right? And all those kind of stuff, you will not be able to come up with the right solutions. So
Right.
really, investing time in enabling people to understand the problem deeper
Mm.
also has like a value in, finally, when they're delivering something, it actually turns out to be of better quality.
Right. So, I mean, I actually hear a lot of empathy, right, in what you're sharing, because the empathy for the child, it just doesn't stop there. I think the design is in such a way that there is a lot of empathy for your volunteers as well. And if I can also say that your culture is built on reflection, right? It is the beautiful process of understanding what I have experienced, what I need to offer, what my needs of my child are, what I offer, and then bringing it back through reflection. That's also very interesting. Now, MAD is one of the top 10 best NGOs to work in India. So, what percentage of your employees are volunteer turned full timers?
Almost everybody now. I would say 4 5 people. We are around 30, 35 people now, out
Mm,
of which around 5 people maybe. I don't exactly know the number because it's not now something we have counted actively.
right,
I can probably check, but like probably 5 people have not come through the volunteering pool. Almost
right.
everybody else have come through the volunteering pool, and now we are even more like we did try recruiting outside a couple of times. It's
Mm,
not always worked out primarily because it's very difficult for not very difficult, but like number one, we have not done a good job
mm,
inducting, like the level of induction required is quite a lot. So we are kind of
mm,
noticing that.
mm,
But also the model that we employ is something people coming from outside is struggling to understand
mm,
and integrate and
mm,
all this kind of stuff. But overall, um, what we have noticed is that there is the once somebody has worked with Make a Difference on ground for 2 years and has understood how the model from a ground level,
mm,
then they have a lot more to contribute than just joining it at the top level. So on like now, even when if somebody is joining us from outside, we do tell them to volunteer at least for a year or two on ground. In fact, actually, every almost every employee in Make a Difference, a lot of us, like I still volunteer, I still mentor children. A lot of us still mentor children or is actively involved on ground, and
mm,
uh,
mm.
yeah, in our own ways too. So you cannot really lose touch
Yeah,
with, like, the whole idea is that
yeah,
who are you designing for? If you lose touch with the person
yeah.
who you're designing for, if you're not in touch with them at least once a month, I feel once a month is too little. But that's where I am, and I'm
Mm,
struggling to do more than that, and I'm kind of thinking how can I improve and things like
mm,
that. But you draw a lot of energy on one side for sure. When things get difficult, like
mm,
like there is only so much uh, in energy you can draw from your the process systems and processes that you're building. At the end of the day, it's when you're working with when the on ground, and it's not even about children as much as people.
right.
When you work with people, you really understand, okay, fine, there's something that gives me a lot of energy, and this is why I do what I do and why it's important. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of energy that comes from it, but also um, like every time I go on ground and come back, my brain is full of new ideas on how we can
Mm,
do and change stuff.
mm, mm.
So yeah, that's the num. So yeah,
Yeah.
most of us are from a ground.
That was going to be my follow up question, Jithin, there, because how is this progression favorable, right? And why do you see them leading from the front, essential to changing status quo? So if you can answer that in terms of how does it really change the dynamics when a volunteer comes in as a full timer? So if you could
Hmm.
just go a little deeper, I mean, I'm not
Sure,
in
sure.
terms of an employee getting to volunteer, that is different because they join and
Hmm.
then it's part of your induction. I understand, which is brilliant. But if it's a
Hmm.
volunteer turned employee while they're continuing to volunteer, how does it really, when you look at changing the status quo, how does that really impact?
Yeah, it fundamentally changes everything, right? Because volunteering is very different from working.
Right,
Working is a transactional contractual obligation where you're
right.
basically saying, hey, you know what, I'm ready to give these many hours of my time.
Mm,
And if you pay me this much money,
mm,
and what I do with that time is, like you can try to make the most out of the time I'm giving you. That's really what an employment contract is. While volunteering is something fundamentally different. Volunteering is, hey, I care about this problem,
mm,
right? And I want to do everything possible to be able to solve that problem in my
mm,
capacity,
mm,
right? And I've been doing this for free, but now I'm doing this full time. So I don't have any other source of income. So
right.
now I'm getting so the transition from a volunteer for a lot of us, for the transition to volunteering into employment is almost seamless. Like, oh, this
Mm,
is what I was doing because you join as a volunteer who is teaching children, then you become a fellow who is
mm,
managing the volunteers in a city, then you
right.
become a strategist, then you're managing
Mm,
the fellows in different cities,
right.
you become the associate in MAD, but you're
Mm,
still managing the same
mm,
fellows in the cities,
mm,
right?
mm,
So your job hasn't changed much, so it's
right.
almost like, hey, I am doing the same thing that I did before, but
Mm,
I'm just now I'm getting paid for it, but that doesn't,
mm,
like, the getting paid is not the central for employment. Getting the reason you're doing this, a big part of the incentive is you're getting paid,
correct.
but because you started as a volunteer is only motivated because you can make a difference,
Mm,
right? Like because they care about a problem, they're making a difference, and that is the primary incentive. So
right,
the incentive remains. So
right.
even when you become an employee, you're still not here because you're getting paid every week, but you're here because you care about this problem, and now it's nice, it's additional bonus that, oh, and I'm getting
Mm.
paid for this. So how good
Mm.
is that? That is good, right? But like,
Mm.
which is enabling me to put more time doing this. And I
Right.
think that orientation is very important, because like, like honestly, when we look at it, this corona times have hit, and um, the funding in the social sector has really gotten affected, right? And uh, if things get, a lot of organizations are talking about percentage employee cuts and all that stuff. I'm fairly confident, me including me, but most of us, if in a push comes to shove, for 2 3 months we have to work without a salary, we will just do it,
Yeah.
because it's not, we will not be like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like we're not getting paid, so now we don't do this, like,
Yeah.
because we are holding a lot of these things, we still need
Mm.
to keep these things going. We will keep it going till somebody else is probably able to come take it over. We'll figure out a solution.
Mm.
Nobody, I'm 100% sure nobody in the organization is going to drop it. Oh, you're not paying me? Sorry, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Not happening, right? Like, so,
Yeah.
I think that's the it's the attitude of a volunteer is very different, and we need more of such people. And who was telling me, in fact, like, there's now a lot of research that is basically coming out on that is favoring volunteering. um, I'm very bad with names, but the Surgeon General under Obama
Mm.
is an Indian person.
Mm.
He's an Indian doctor. He actually recently came out with a book called Togetherness,
Mm.
and what he's talking about is the rise of mental health disorders in the country, in America and stuff like that. And the
Mm.
solution that he's mentioning for that is volunteering,
Mm.
because he also feels it
Wow.
so, because yeah, like and it's great, right? Like, like,
Mm.
Vaishnav, even like when we
Mm.
started this whole volunteering and all that stuff, no, it was not such a mainstream thing. It was still
Right.
something that, people, not everybody used to do this stuff,
True.
right? Like, I still remember parents telling me that, we are scamming people, because, you're asking people to work for free and not giving them
Right.
anything in return. But now it has become, it's not about becoming mainstream. We volunteering did go through a mainstream phase where people were volunteering because it will help them get into Ivy League colleges and stuff like that. There is that spectrum of stuff,
Mm.
but it has moved past that now, where
Mm.
now it is more and more people are realizing that volunteering is something that every human being should be doing
Right.
for their own wellness,
Yep.
for their own well-being, for their own way of staying connected
Yep.
to this thing, which is very important way for human beings to engage,
Right.
right? And also for the well-being of the world, like, the way we, uh, like the attitude that volunteering brings us is the kind of attitude that we need in our workplaces,
Mm.
and not the other way around.
Right.
So yeah, so that's yeah. So yeah, we would definitely value people who have volunteered, and it'll be hard for me to honestly hire anybody um, who says that they care about children and is 25
Mm.
years old and is
Mm.
still now not volunteered. I'm like,
Volunteer. True.
if you cared about children, what were you doing for the
True.
last, like after 18? Like, I can imagine before
Right.
18, yeah, you know, your
Yeah.
parents won't let you go out and all that. But after
Right.
18, you have no excuse. You should have, it should
Yeah.
be there. Yeah.
That's very true. I think what I hear you say is that intent is become very gradual, right? You know how it's
Mm.
built up through these multiple experiences. Because I know of many people who have come in for these certificates, but then have been with the organization for many more years for the children, for the culture of the organization, and then it kind of becomes an addiction also, right? It's like you don't know what to do with your time if you're not
Mhm.
at a shelter home with children, or with your peer group working on something exciting like an event or something. So thanks again for sharing that. I know you're a great storyteller, Jitin. So if you can share one of your most interesting initiatives that engages volunteers, and particularly a story about a child and a volunteer, right? And how your work has transformed them or impacted them. From the volunteers lens, I would really like to understand how it has shaped them to enter this ed sector, right? Like we just discussed, they might have just come in for very different reasons, but now have grown on to be in the sector, understand the context, understand the problem at a greater deal. Like you also spoke about the ecosystem, systemic change, understanding that there are other players in the system. So if you can talk about one child story, like one of your beneficiaries, and one of your volunteers as well. I think that would be brilliant for us and the participants here on the webinar.
For sure. So, just to get it right, this would be like how a volunteer has made an impact in a child's
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
Would
exactly.
that be like a fair
Yeah,
enough this thing?
correct.
Sure. I'm just thinking which one to say. this would be, yeah, like, quite a few. So let me try with this one. So this is one of the youth that I know of who's based out of Cochin, and a volunteer who's kind of worked with him throughout the whole period. So his background was that when he was around 10 years old, his parents split, and his mother had to go and live with his mother's family. And the mother's family was not very happy to be able to, they were from a poorer background, which basically means they were struggling to take care of an additional two people in their lives, and they were not particularly kind towards him, and used to beat him up. And it kind of, after a point, it kind of got to a point where he felt that he couldn't stay in that house anymore, so he ran away from home. And when he ran away from home, he basically walked. He did not have to, and he walked. He ended up in. He did not know. His idea was to go and meet his father, and he knew that his father was. He had his father's phone number, and he knew which district he was in, and he was in another district. So he decided to walk to that district, and once uh, he walked, and he ended up in a bus stand, where he ended up, like, a couple of old people came and asked him what is he doing, what is happening. He was kind of telling him what was going on, and they said, come, we will buy you some food, we'll help you out, let's figure this out. And goes in there and sexually abuses him. So now he somehow gets out of that. He runs away. He ends up in Viga Land. I don't know if any of you guys are aware of Viga Land. Is a theme park, is a water theme park in Cochin. He ends up outside Viga Land because he saw a lot of kids there, and there, they saw him torn clothes or whatever, and the watchman thought that he was trying to steal whatever and started beating him up. Called the cops, handed him over to the cops. Now, once the cops got him, he said what was going on, what was the story. So he said, "Okay, give me your father's number." He calls up the father. The father picks up the phone and says he doesn't know anybody like this. He completely denies the existence of the child, and now the police is stuck with this person. Unfortunately, the police thought that they were lying. He was lying, so he ended up in the lockup for a couple more days. But finally, he ended up in a shelter home. So this is typically like a story of like how a child ends up in a shelter home. These are not like extreme cases. We have like, there are dime a dozen stories like this. And what is important is that, this is a child who has really felt abandoned in his life. And he was, so when he entered a shelter home, he was somebody he was extremely silent, but was also, had major anger issues. On the other side, rebelled against authority very actively. And that's how we kind of got acts, when we make a difference started working with him. And the volunteer who was working with him was a teacher who was actively supporting him in the in the class. When she kind of understood what was going on, and she was able to, what she was really able to do is to kind of help him understand what care is, and how it is to be cared for who you are, right? And feel connect, like, like he has kind of spoken to me about it a little later. Like, what kind of became a real thing for him was that somebody who really believed in him, and really cared about him, and that mattered a lot to him. And he started working and doing he started studying and all those things to prove to her, to some extent, that, like, and want for her cause. And like, and we keep seeing that a lot. Children, that's how they show their affection and love. And like, and he scored some, he ended up being a very good student. He was one of the, scored some, I don't know, 90s or something like that, in 10th standard or 12th standard or something like that. Scored really well. But again, got into some trouble at the shelter home, got into some fights with the shelter authorities itself, and got kicked out of the shelter home midway. And while, because she's still in touch with him, she had a relationship with him, ensured that he got into a good college, got into the, he finished his college, he finished a bachelor's, and, he's a good, he writes amazing poetry and stuff like that. But what we noticed about him was that, even though there were, he kept going in and out of depression multiple times because of that, and he needed kind of counseling support for that whole period. So there was consistent support even post that. But the story that I want to talk about is this very specific one, where he just got, like, what we kind of noticed in this whole about him was that there's a lot of self-sabotage going on. So he actually attended an interview where he's now 24 years old. The salary was around 70,000, and he cleared the interview,
mm,
and it was actually done really well. But they needed some certifications from him,
mm,
from the previous employer. But
mm,
unfortunately, the previous employer had kind of not paid him a salary for 2 months, and he had actually fought there and got into an argument, and that's how he had left
mm,
the premises. Right,
mm,
so he was not sure and confident about going back and getting a positive certification from there.
mm,
Right, like while at this point of time, what we were able to do was that the volunteer was able to intervene at that point of time. So what was interesting for us was that the moment he realized that, oh, you know what, I may not get this job, or there is some amount of like, oh, they don't want me because I don't have this positive
mm,
certificate to give them.
mm,
He immediately flipped. It's like
mm,
nobody in his batch has even gotten 70,000. But he's like, I don't want this job. I'm done. I
mm,
don't care about any of this stuff. Right? It
mm,
was very interesting for us to even notice that, because there was a like all the abandonment this thing triggered, and
yeah,
he's like he doesn't want to be rejected anymore,
mm,
right? And all of that, but like while still working with him, ensuring that talking to the couple of the not like, if you really think about it, like it's all the times that we intervene in their lives that matter, right?
yeah,
Like normally there will be a parent who will kind of talk to him and make him understand what the reality is, and
right,
but then with a lot of for our children it's normally not there,
mm,
right? So how they were able to kind of have a chat with him, make him understand what it is, them directly reaching out to the previous employer, go
mm,
escalate the situation a couple of levels higher, make them
mm,
understand why it is important,
mm,
and get the certification. Now he's working there. Now he's getting paid some 70,000
mm,
a month, right?
mm,
So that for me was like a good example of like the kind of work that matters, which is that it is long term. It's not like, so for somebody like him, you wouldn't be here if so many years of support was not put in, and the depths of relationships were not that good, that he was willing to kind of believe in it, trust in it,
mm,
and it goes both ways,
mm,
right? And so yeah, so that would probably be like a
mm.
like one story that I can think of right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if I can go back to my question, one story of a volunteer, right, who has taken on this path, who has come to the ed sector full time
Hmm.
because they volunteered maybe, and where they are right now. So if I can just tag it with another question, right? What are certain opportunities that are available for today's youth, or particularly who are active volunteers? What are some ways in which they can play a greater role in the social sector? If I can tie that in, right? Both questions.
Yeah, for sure. Like, so I think from a volunteer perspective, like today's, like Shreya would be one somebody I would think about. Joined Make a Difference as a volunteer in her first year of college, spent 3 years as a volunteer with us, found it as a transformative experience. She took after this, after 3 years of our volunteering, she joined TIS to do her master's in, so that she can understand this better.
Mm,
Got in the first round. Then after TIS, joined Make a Difference back as an employee,
mm,
taught us, worked for another 2 years, and then in that working time, she realized that she needs to, what she would like to do is specialize. She was able to figure out what was the specialization that she was
yeah.
specifically interested in, and now
Mm,
she's just finished her master's in Harvard at school, to with that specialization that she's
mm,
excited about, and now she's joining back. No, she's not joining. But we've entered into a new contract. She's not finished her course yet, but we
mm,
already contractually engaged her, and
mm,
we are working with her again
wonderful.
in the process, right? Like so, social sector social sector is the largest fastest growing employer in the world right now,
Mm,
because when you look at from an like there's a lot of jobs that is being lost right
mm,
now,
mm,
which is primarily because of computerization and automation and stuff like that,
yeah.
which are all process jobs that that is about executing a process, and hence can be automated after some point of time, or like more than automated. Earlier you needed 10 people to do it, now only one person is there required to
Mm,
be done it, like jobs
mm,
like bank managers and stuff like that.
mm,
So when those are like, when high level jobs are getting automated out, even
mm,
stock trading and all those kind of stuff. But
mm,
problem solving is extremely human relationship
mm,
centric, and
mm,
these jobs are actually not going away anywhere. In fact, the fastest employment, the fastest number of jobs are actually being created in the social sector,
mm,
especially in times of Corona, where I know there is like temporarily there will be some struggle with regards to getting funding and stuff like that. But there's only going to be there's only going to be more opportunities in the social sector to be able to solve these problems, because
mm,
it has become a lot more clearer how these problems are actually also interlinked and interconnected, right?
Right.
Even if you look at what is happening in the US right now, even though Corona was really the problem, like all the racial injustices
Mm.
that has happened, all the lack of investments in that has been
Right.
done in human development has all come out in a different fashion. So
Right.
everything is interconnected, and people are increasingly realizing that. And it's very interesting to see that how even in the US, what they're saying is to defund the police and have more community centric programs.
Right.
Have a community centric program where you can have, for mental health, have a community
Mm.
centric program, to support with education, like
Right.
make it a lot more community centric
Mm.
than police centric, right? Like control
Okay.
centric, right?
Mm.
So which is shifting from police to all those community centric jobs are going to be created in the social sector, and this
Mm.
is going to happen everywhere else also, right?
Right.
Like, so there is a massive trend to
Mm.
in the space. And one of the belief systems that, even earlier, when this whole idea of like universal basic income and all
Mm.
of those things were coming out, which is that, like, what happens when, the basically some people will be you wouldn't need the entire population of the country
Mm.
to work for the country to sustain.
Mm.
So what do you do with the unemployed people? You're actually able to provide like a universal basic income to everybody. Then what will they do?
Mm.
How will they be in, how will they get their purpose from? And a big part of that was how majority of them will be actually be will be taken up into the social sector,
Right.
because there is no dearth of problems to be solved yet. There are
Mm.
still so many problems to be solved, and the skill set to
Right.
learn how to solve problems
Mm.
is going to be the most valuable
True.
skill set in the next century for a
Mm.
lot of us. And so being able to do that was awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned about the skill set and also how big the problem is, which brings me to, my next question. I'm very curious to know that over these years, your target segment has consciously been children at shelter homes, and I completely understand why. But do you work closely with the government, because I'm sure there are a lot of policies and the needs also for these children with lesser care and access to resources. So if you can talk a little bit about your work with the government, and what do you do to address the problem at a systemic level?
Got it. Got it. So the way we see how to solve a problem in its full scale is to be able to have a methodology that works, and and have the ability to implement that methodology to everybody who's experiencing that problem,
Mm,
right? So the methodology is basically what the policy changes,
mm,
right? And the infrastructure is the government infrastructure that finally implements these solutions. Like a shelter home is an infrastructure through which the government is delivering
right.
these things. What we believe at this point of time is that both the like nobody knows what the full methodology is, and
Mm,
the infrastructure is extremely insufficient to solve the problem also.
mm,
What that means is that, like, today nobody knows how to take a child from the street and
mm,
what are the interventions they need to provide. So we can be 100% sure that at least 90% of them
mm,
will be able to come out of it with with middle class outcomes.
right.
That's basically the idea,
Mm,
and
mm,
man is developing that in
mm,
some way, and we are getting closer to. So we're like, unless we are confident about our methodology, we
mm,
shouldn't go for policy change,
right.
because there are two ways to change policy. One is an incremental policy change, where we'll change a policy to so it will be slightly better than what it used to be.
Mm,
But what we feel is a better approach is to be able to understand what the final solution is, and then so it might not be an incremental improvement to the current system. It will be a
mm,
fundamental shift away
mm,
from the current system, but a completely new system. But
mm,
because we have already proven the model on ground, it will
right.
be a lot more easier to be implemented, kind of thing, or rather, it'll be easier to be passed. So
Okay.
that's from a policy point of view why we have
Mm,
not started policy yet. And when it comes to infrastructure, we do not believe that a shelter home system alone will
mm,
actually be able to solve the problem. In fact, shelter homes are not a good place for children to be. We should, as much as possible, try to avoid children
mm,
ending up in a shelter home. Absolutely. And any system that if we make the shelter homes really an amazing place, right?
mm,
Or right, shelter homes, if we focus too much on the shelter home as an infrastructure,
mm,
it will only increase the problem, because more children will be separated from their family and will end up in a shelter home, and that causes a lot of trauma in itself.
right.
So the infrastructure that we believe is the community infrastructure, so that we
Mm,
believe that for every a shelter home should only be a space
mm,
where a child is temporarily held when
mm,
the family is going through a tough time, and
mm,
is not able to take care of the child,
mm,
right?
right.
But the moment a child enters a shelter home, the people in the community itself should,
Mm,
one, ensure the child in rental shelter home is having a positive experience and is providing, getting all the necessary support, developmental support that they need require. That's there.
Mm,
But
mm,
parallelly, working with the family of the children to
mm,
understand what was the challenge that they faced because of which they are in the situation. Is it a medical emergency? Many a times
mm,
that's what is basically going on. Somebody in the family has gotten so drastically sick that now they don't have any money anymore, and that's basically going. So then how do you support them with the medical emergency?
mm,
Sometimes the legal emergency.
mm,
Sometimes somebody is in a jail, and that becomes a whole different problem in itself. So they might provide legal aid.
mm,
Sometimes it's a mental health issue where there
mm,
is like a lot of abuse between the father and the mother because of whatever mental health challenges. So they might require counseling or they might require psychiatric help. So
yeah.
that needs to be provided. So like
Mm,
there's a whole spectrum. Sometimes it's financial. So there's a whole spectrum of issues that the family has, and
mm,
the community should be able to work with the family, and the community has the resources. For every shelter home that has got 100 children living in it, there are at least
mm,
like a lakh people around it who's living around it,
right,
right? We should
right.
be able to provide that lack has this resources to be able to provide the support for the people. But
Mm,
the role of the community, the community that we build around the shelter home, is to be
mm,
able to be that conduit between the larger community
mm,
and the people who are at risk.
right.
And so real impact that we believe here that needs to happen is how fast are they able to get the parents out of the crisis that they are
Mm,
in.
mm,
And then once they're out of the crisis, how
mm,
do we once they're out of the crisis for 6 months and they're living a stable life again,
mm,
how to repatriate the child back
back.
to the
Right,
family
right.
and continue providing the support at the family level itself. There's nobody
Mm,
stopping us. There's nothing stopping us from delivering support. You don't need to be only in a shelter home to deliver support.
right.
We can deliver support at the family level itself. How do we continue providing the support at the family level itself till the child and the family is able to, for us
Right.
till 28, and we have built community systems which are not
Mm,
costly to be able to continue providing that support,
mm,
right? So that is the model.
mm,
So, which means that currently the government alone cannot solve this problem. Community has to be involved. And the only challenge here is today MAD is running 60 such communities across 23 cities, right?
mm,
Around some 60 institutions, 60 shelter homes.
mm,
But that is only our way of testing how this is happening.
right.
But more importantly, at 60, we are reaching out to 3,500 children, but
Mm,
there are 35 million children in the country, right? Who are in need of this support, right?
mm,
So you cannot. The current model is we have 30 employees who is providing support to 3,500 children.
mm,
Now, when it comes to 335 million, we cannot
mm,
scale and have those many number of employees to run the show.
right,
It doesn't work like that,
right.
right? So each community has to be self-organizing and
Mm,
self-sustaining. Instead
mm,
of it's somebody at the top. Currently, there
mm,
is a employee base that is providing the
mm,
organizing capacity and a
mm,
lot of the financial capacity also of the community. So
mm,
every year we are trying to reduce the amount of like how can we enable the community to stand on its own feet, where even if there's nobody giving them instructions, can they still continue providing the support year after year after year after year.
right,
That's one thing that we're figuring out. So
right.
it's almost self-mobilizing, right?
Mm,
While on the other side, also self-sustaining. There will be
mm,
cost attached to all of these things, right?
right.
How can they raise the resources required? Let it be manpower resources. Let it be helping people get placed. Well, from a job
Mm,
perspective, sometimes it might be money. Any of those things.
mm,
So we have not gotten there yet.
right.
Where we still, still nationally we play a role in keeping the communities going, and
Mm,
we still fund a lot of these communities themselves. So
wonderful.
once we get to that point, so once we complete developing the methodology and
Mm,
once we complete understanding the infrastructure better,
you'll
then
be
we will probably be going into a policy change and working closely with the government. But
right.
till then, the only engagement we have with the government is that we work in a lot of government shelter homes,
Mm,
where children who are who go to CWC end up in these shelter homes. That's all.
mm, wonderful. I mean, I really like how you zoomed out, and it's not just, it doesn't stop with the shelter home or the child there, but it also goes back to the parent and the community. I think that that is the greater need there. Thank you so much for answering that. Going back to your previous response, you shared about possessing the right skill set. So, what do you believe are some skills that young people need today to be in the ed sector or the development sector? Because we spoke about values and values on which MAT is also built. But what about the skills? What are some skills in through your lens that young people should need to be in the sector?
Got it. So the skills that we are currently focusing in MAD to a great extent is that number one, transformation leadership skills. So leadership is definitely like is a solid skills that you need to build, and we follow a methodology called transformation leadership, where instead of just telling, instead of managing people,
Mm.
um, uh, what you're doing is that you're transforming them from
Right.
people who cannot do this to people who can do what they need to do, right?
Mm.
Like, and making that transformation possible for them by believing in them and all that stuff. So
Mm.
that's a major skill set that we focus on and we provide support for. The other one that we focus on is solution design, which is that
Mm.
at the end of the day, to solve a problem, you need to, how do you understand a problem at its depth and come out with, understand its core drivers and come up with strategies that you can then, test in an iterative manner and
Mm.
finally come up with something that works, where
Mm.
you know for a fact that impact can be delivered, right?
Mm.
Like, so being able to come up, so that it's a design thing, it's a type of design thinking, but design thinking is normally meant for the for-profit sector,
Mm.
to design products. But
Mm.
how do you design impactful solutions
Right.
is a skill set in itself, because
Mm.
you're, at the end of the day, you're trying to come up with solutions to solve problems. If you don't know how to come up with these solutions, then it becomes a, then yeah, it's not so great. The third is, once you have a solution, you need to have the ability to execute that solution really well. So I feel in MAD we focus a lot on the agile project management system. It said, how do you, use the existing resources that you have, and with the agility move the resources
Yeah.
around, and also move, like based on whatever new changes that is coming your way, adapt it actively
Mm.
and move these things around and move forward. That's something that we focus a lot on. And finally, we have a unique way of like people management skills, which is
Mm.
that like how do you mobilize like large, at the end of the day there are 30 employees and 3,500 people who are on ground, who turn up every week
Mm.
and do their work. So how do
Mm.
you kind of manage like a, it's more of how do you manage a movement
Right.
instead of how do you manage in, like how do you manage 5 people or 10 people,
Mm.
right? Which is a whole different type of this thing. And I feel that's because the scale of the problems we're talking about is so huge, that
Mm.
what we need is movement training and not management training,
Mm.
to a great extent,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So that's the other skill set that I
Mm.
would look for.
Mm.
There are obviously a lot of other more specific skill set, but I feel that these are at a management level, and I'm kind of speaking from a kind of management perspective. At a
Mm.
management level, if these skill sets you clearly have,
Mm.
then you have your basics solid, and from then you can take it forward from there accordingly.
Yeah. And I think agility right now sits in perfectly with today's context. And even for the Bhumi Fellowship, most of the skills that you shared play an essential role, even at the selection stage. And of course, what are the kind of exposure or opportunities that have been built into the system so that our fellows will be able to build, like particularly the entrepreneurial skills that you mentioned, right? Because design thinking is essential, and for us to understand the problem as the ecosystem itself and not just through one lens. So my final question to you is, what do you envision for your volunteers? I mean, you've been here for as long as Bhumi, 13, 14 years, right? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much same. We are kind of been started. We've been around at the same time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure that you've seen a lot of volunteers come into the system, contribute, stay, and people who have left. But what do you envision for your volunteers?
So what we always wanted was like I have a relationship with all the 10 children that I started working with,
Mm.
and that is a very deep valuable, it's just like a family. Imagine like you do have, you value your family relationship a lot. Like,
Yeah.
if something tomorrow happens to your family, it would really hurt you a lot, it will really bother you a lot. You're really attached to the family, and why? Because you get a lot of satisfaction, you get a lot of meaning from your life, you have a lot of sense of purpose. A lot of the things comes from your family. Like, family is like a very critical component of a human, this thing, right? While because family is also one of those only relationships which you know for so many years.
Yeah.
There's like, like you may not have, you may have some friends, but you may not have so many friends who you know for 10, 20, 30 years of your life. Or
Mm.
there are very few people in your life who you can look at and say, okay, you know what, this person will be there till the end.
Mm.
Like till I die, I will, these few people will be important to me, and I will be that kind of a thing. And there is a lot of value in that.
Mm.
And I feel that like what we envision for each and every one of our volunteers is, when they join MAD, they're able to meet those 4, 5, 6 children who they're able to build a deep relationship with and be there for. And it's not a one-sided journey. it is a
Right.
both sided. Like, like one of my favorite quotes is what Maya Agnello
Mm,
said, which is that, like, if you have come here to help me, you're
mm,
wasting your time.
mm,
If you have come here because your liberation is intertwined with mine,
mm.
come, let's work together. Which is really what is going on, right? Like, so it is where they're able to form a deep bond with somebody, with a group of children who they value a lot and who is valued by them a
Mm,
lot, and like grow old with them,
right.
and introduce them to your children,
Mm,
introduce their children, gets introduced.
mm.
Like, I still remember one of the first children that was born in for my one of my youth was born on my birthday,
Wow.
right? It was just such a, like, it was just
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
amazing, and it was just, and I remember sitting with him in WhatsApp deciding what name do we put, and he's sending a bunch of names that he like, and we're sitting
Wow.
and figuring out what the names are. So these are all very beautiful experiences, which I genuinely believe everybody should have the opportunity to have, and everybody can have, and it creates such an impact in the world. Like, we are at the end of the day living in an extremely unequal world, right? And like, we have to and we are not here because of just who we are. Like, we did have a big lottery of the womb.
Mm,
If you were born in a different womb, you cannot really be sure this is where you would be, right?
mm,
Like, and it's like, like, I've seen a lot of the children that I work with.
mm,
Like, they're all more hardworking, more capable, have better leadership skills than I do,
mm.
right? And still, our life circumstances have still been, because of our life circumstances, things have been different.
Right.
So just acknowledging that that is also what is going on, and hence like, being grateful for what you have and being willing to share, right, is the only way we can have a more equitable world. So yeah, so my vision for our volunteers is to be able to meet a child, and then that, be with, be a support system for the child, and be a family for the child, and back for the
Mm,
rest of their lives.
right.
And that's what we're building mad around. And now with all this technology coming in, because
Mm,
now corona, we realize that we cannot
mm,
go into a shelter home probably this year. We're
mhm,
not able to enter a shelter home this year. We plan to computerize the whole system. And the
mm,
moment we are thinking about computerization, what we're realizing is that earlier a volunteer who taught a child for a year had
mm.
to move on because they're shifting the city.
Right.
But now, even if you're
Yeah.
going to another
Yeah.
country,
Yeah.
you can still continue engaging
Yeah.
with the same children. So it's kind of giving us
True.
all new opportunities. So
True.
we are actively redesigning MAD from,
Mm,
keeping that in mind,
mm,
because our long-term dream is the child and the volunteer are
mm,
lifelong partners in each
mm.
other's lives,
Right.
and that will be the dream.
It's a beautiful dream, and you're demonstrating agility there. Thank you so much, Jithin. In like closing thoughts, if you can talk to our participants about why they should be a part of the Bhumi Fellowship, and how it will be changing the ecosystem or the ed sector. I would be very happy if you can close with that.
Yeah, for sure. Like, the reason I'm here is because I genuinely do believe in what the work Bhumi is doing. And if there is ever a better time to be in the social sector, it is now, right? Like, this is the best time to be in the social sector, because it is like the problems that the country and the world is facing is in everybody's minds. Like,
Mm,
it has reached a stage where it is no longer ignorable, and which so social work is going to actually become the center stage of a lot of the conversations that's going to happen. And it like, so there is that one component there, but the other part of it is also from the angle of what you're going to learn doing the work. This is all I have done. When I was 19, I went to walk into shelter home. I have not done my MBA. I have not done anything else. All I've done is worked with children, and now I'm 34 years old. And if I've learned anything, it is by working on ground with children and going online and googling stuff,
mm,
right? And uh, the amount and if I can run an organization like Make a Difference, which is, at the end of the day, it is fairly large. There is a 23 cities operations going on for these number of years, all this kind of stuff. And um, if I'm able to do all of those things, that is only because of the work that that we are able to do, doing fellowships like this,
yeah.
right? So I have been a fellow in Make a Difference myself. Like, that is one of, like, what I did was I first did some of these things, and then that those becomes fellowships, and I moved on. And because we realized we needed more people to do this stuff. So uh, yeah, like, if there is a bet, like, I at least learn best when I'm actually faced with, it's very easy to sit in a room and or like, you can go do your MBA where they will do case studies with you. I've been part of these Harvard case study sessions, and they were absolutely boring and, like, yeah, like we by the end of it, like a bunch of social entrepreneurs said we don't want to be part of this anymore.
Mm.
Primarily because it's all very hypothetical, right?
Mm.
And you can sit in there and you know, the person who can speak the best
Yeah.
can, you know, come with amazing solutions. But
Mm.
when you're actually immersed in a problem,
Mm.
and you know, trying your level best to figure out a way to solve that and move
Yeah.
forward,
Yeah.
that is, and it requires so much more than just intelligence, right? It
Mm.
requires it develops you as in a much more holistic manner. And like I don't think, you know, like there is a reason why the Ivy League colleges want you to volunteer, you know, and the highly value, like almost every employee of Make a Difference who's left,
Mm.
like the last guy, the person, I don't know if you remember Rakesh. Rakesh was the
Yeah.
person who was heading at
Yeah.
support.
Yeah.
He
Hyderabad.
got through Yale,
Mm.
is
Mm.
now working in the, you know,
Yeah.
the sector. So
Mm.
no, he's not working in the sector. He's moved out of the sector.
Mm.
So like anybody who's been who's gone through all this thing, you know, you will know
Mm.
thousands of people who have actually gotten to these Ivy League kind of spaces.
Yeah.
Why do they value it? Because they understand that that's where shit gets real. And
Yeah.
if you can take that, if you can, you know, stay, you know, keep going in that space and
Mm.
complete 2 years of it, right,
Mm.
and come out of it, that says a lot. And in today's world, that is those are the skill sets that's valued a lot more
Mm.
than your ability to, like, it's, you can find a dime a dozen people who can do data analysis,
Mm.
but
Mm.
can you find people who in face of adversity
Mm.
cannot lose their cool, can
Yeah.
still figure out solutions,
Mm.
and then figure out a way to implement that, and
Mm.
then fail at it,
Mm.
and try again, and
Mm.
move forward while working with a lot of other people,
Right.
bringing the stakeholders together.
Mm.
And by the end of it, the person who comes out of something is a lot more humble, because they understand that they cannot alone do anything.
Do anything.
Like, you know, when you actually solve the problem, you've experienced the whole thing.
Mm.
And that's what companies value. Like, that's why companies hire a lot more people, you know, like Israel,
Mm.
they hire a lot of their, you know,
Mm.
their military, like, you know, everybody has to go through military.
Military. Yeah.
Well, the military is another place where you experience all of these. They're all
Yeah.
experiential learning opportunities.
Yeah.
And you know, if you know, hopefully, like, we will never have war.
Mm.
In 2020, the real war is in our classrooms.
Yeah.
And you know, that's where we need our most bravest people.
True.
And I'm really happy that Bhumi is actually giving an opportunity for so many young people.
Yeah.
You know, it's such an amazing brand that it's a lot more easier to go through Bhumi, where Bhumi will set up all of these things for them, than to do this alone.
Mm.
And the opportunities you will get through Bhumi will always be
Mm.
a lot more. So yeah, I'm very happy that Bhumi is doing something like this.
Thank you so much, Jithin. Thank you for the wonderful message and, of course, taking your precious time out to answer all of those questions, to explain Matt's journey and how volunteering can really, set the context to bigger change. Thank you so much, Jithin. Take care and hope to see you soon.
It was
Bye.
good talking to you, Vaishnavi. It's been a long time. We'll
Yeah,
talk again later. Bye bye.
definitely.
Take care.
Bye. Take
Bye
care.
bye. Bye bye. Bye
Thank you
everyone.
all. Thanks to all of those who've been part of the webinar. Thank you so much. If you're yet to know about Bhumi Fellowship and how you can transform the ecosystem in schools, we would urge you to visit fellowship.bhumi.ngo. The link is available on the chat box. You can apply and we will get in touch with you very soon. Thank you very much. We'll be back next week with one more guest speaker. Do join us then. Thank you. Good night.